Hello, everybody. Welcome to another class. And here's Jamal joining us just in time. And we're going to be talking about playing with sound today, assonance, rhyme, and alliteration. And yes, I said assonance. I did not say anything else. But hey, welcome, you guys. Let's get started.
We're ready. We're eager.
Like, and you guys can start being intelligent at any time talking about this stuff. No. All right. Well, let's just get right into it. What do we mean by rhyme, alliteration, and assonance? Of course, rhyme is the easy one. Rhyme is a repetition of similar or identical sounds at the end of two or more words. For example, roses are red, violets are blue. Red and blue do not rhyme, but as starlight, star bright, light and bright rhyme. That's like, we're like back in kindergarten here with this. Poets use rhyme a lot of times to lend like a sing-song quality to verse. Rhyme is both hated and loved by all of us. It creates rhythm. This is the beauty of language, and it can help emphasize certain points and make a poem easier to remember, which I kind of think is one of the main reasons why rhyme is good, and it increases its appeal. And you guys, did I forget anything?
No.
Well, okay. Well, I will move on to alliteration. Alliteration is the repetition of the initial consonant sounds in two or more neighboring words or syllables. For example, of course, she sells seashells by the seashore. The repetition of the S's is the alliteration. Alliteration is used in poetry to create a harmonious effect, and it also serves to catch the reader's attention, making the text memorable. I love alliteration. I probably overuse it. It can also add rhythm and musicality to a poem and sometimes be used to convey a certain mood or tone. I think everybody has probably seen I want to say it's South Park, but it's not South Park. Anyways, it's Lois is talking about the sizzling sand sliding sweat down onto the sidewalk. That is one of my favorite. I can't remember what show that is now. It's a cartoon. That's all I remember. And then assonance. The repetition or identical or similar vowel sounds in neighboring words. For example, hear the mellow wedding bells. The repetition of the E sound is assonance. Assonance is used in poetry to create an internal rhyme, which I love, and I think a lot of us use that. It can give a line a rhythmic quality. Like alliteration and rhyme, it can also make a phrase or line more memorable and can be used to create a particular mood or atmosphere depending on the sounds used, like Lois talking about the sweat sizzling on a summer sidewalk. Just kind of makes it feel sexy the way she says that. And that is that. What do you guys have to say to that? Let Frog the comments hollow. Begin. Do what?
Frog hollow.
There's also that weird one. It's hard to say. Onomatopoeia.
Oh yeah,
onomatopoeia.
Onomatopoeia. Yeah, it's like splish splash, ding dong,
boom, sploosh,
boom, sploosh. But you make the actual sound of the thing with words that you're talking about. So
yeah,
yeah, that's with all that too. Is like, obviously there's the words like sploosh has kind of a softer sound. Knock is hard like a knock, and that's important that as we always are reaching for more descriptive words and trying to get out of the words that are overused, is to make sure that you're still using a word that actually conveys the essence of your image, that you're not using a soft sound for a hard action or vice versa.
Yeah. What do you think about dissonance? How would you explain that, Colleen? Dissonance. It's like the inharmony of things, right? Like inharmonious words, like the sounds, like the opposite of assonance a bit or something like that.
Yeah, I think like especially if you're writing like horror poetry and you want to have a jarring image, or you want to change, maybe even in fiction something's going really smoothly, you have full sentences, and then you start to have shorter sentences and incomplete sentences as you try and emphasize something. So you can do the same with poetry, and with that it's like even using things like a M dash, like if you want that kind of break, that sudden break, because an M dash in dialogue indicates a like if you interrupted me halfway through a sentence, then my dialogue would show with an M dash.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I am a fan of the M dash to create that feeling of conflict or tension.
Yeah. I probably like the M dash most of all. I'm not so big on commas, as anyone who's read my poetry has noticed.
So, all right, I'm going to get into the first questions. Start us off. How does rhyme affect the mood and tone of a piece of poetry? And do you guys have any examples?
What was the question? I can't see it. It's not coming up in my chat.
Yeah, I can't see them either.
Oh, I actually didn't. I was just asking you, but I can't put it up in chat.
Okay.
It's how does the use of rhyme affect the mood or tone of a piece of literature?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
So I think
no.
I think it so it sets the pace for if it's a so you said literature.
Well, poetry, yeah. The only literature that matters.
I think it it sets the tone of the poem. You said rhythm. So I think it sets the tone for how the reader is going to ingest the poem, like how fast they're going to read it, how like it's like it's like listening to a piece of music. I mean, that's gonna be your tempo. It's gonna set the tempo for it's gonna set the tempo for the poem, essentially. Like like if it's gonna be a slow piece or like a fast something fast, etc. Like not literally reading it that fast, but like as if you're listening to something that is up tempo, whatever. So I mean, I think rhyme and rhyme does that. For example, I'm trying to think of like so there's a part here in the Dirges of Moldor. So where this is a verse novel. It's not particularly rhyming, but it's more about rhythm. And Lautremont uses semicolons, which I know that's not really. I like semicolons, but it's more of an older older style.
Yeah.
But there's a particular he does it throughout the whole book, but I'm trying to find like a particular part where it's like he goes and he says well, I'm not gonna read the whole piece, but like if you're reading one of the first dirges, this is like the second page, but it's he's kind of talking about this sort of like biblical creation of this world, but the dirges are basically about this like it's like a satire, this like self-hating man, but so he's kind of setting this rhythm where it's like you're with the use of like M dashes and so the kind of poems that I'm like this poem that I'm referring to right now. Oh, sorry, background, we can't see it. No,
not gonna work.
This the poem that I'm referring to is it's a verse novel, but I called The Dirges of Moldor by Lautremont. These are probably more prose poems, prose and free verse poems. So in regards to rhythm and rhyme, when you're reading something like this, it's kind of like there are bits of M dashes and semicolons that are flowing you from like it's almost like reading not the Bible. I'm trying to think of a better example, but it's like reading a piece of it's like reading in like an Ada or something, and it's like one phrase flows into the next, into the next, and the next, but it's still one long narrative. But in terms of the tone, for example, the tone is meant to be this long orchestral
Rhythmic.
piece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like an Anglo-Saxon verse, which I attempted once, but still not successfully. Is it has two parts, so you usually have a pause in the middle, and then you have two words that have maybe similar. They might have assonance, they might be alliterative. So you'd have Jamal jumped over the
Jam.
no, but it like the second half. So Jamal jumped would be the first one, and then it would be through the throng or something like that, where, and it doesn't have to be the beginning letter, but you have two parts in one line, and there's two words that have that alliteration. They don't have to be side by side. They're usually, I think, a verb or a noun. It looks like it's an easy form, but what it has is that real rhythm going through it all the way, and it has that alliteration or assonance that pulls it along. And because it was like a bardic form where these people would recite these long verses in front of the fire, or while drinking horns of mead. It's that kind of rhythm and alliteration helps the memory as well. But yeah, it's like I want to try it again, but it was a lot harder than I thought it would be. Still not successful.
I have an example that I can read that's not in the bardic tradition, but it does use a lot of assonance and a lot of rhyme, and creates imagery and a mood and a tone. So I can share it if.
Yeah, absolutely. You're a bard. We're modern day bards, right?
Modern day bards. That's right. This is called Gorgon Fruit. And it's pretty much kind of like it's obviously dark poetry. It's about a garden of stone people. It'll all be explained as you hear it. So Gorgon Fruit. Some feast of petrification, reaching shadows numb. Antiquated forms angle to tragic light in sight of setting sun. Voices there moaning in the sonic gray. Dreadful moss on sunken pool and empty paths of day. Heaving, the still breathing in stone. Pigments morph rustic white, all life akin to bone. Hauntedly the haunted hunger, glory to blossom doom. Stillness of deepest time in roots of shadowed moon. Echoes noosed on loathsome branches, strange fruit scented with lidless eye, demanding the gorging of graying meat from those who fear to die.
I like it.
You got lots of rhythm there, and then you've got things like heaving and breathing. You've got that slant rhyme where can't remember what it was now, like there was moon and room. So yeah, those definitely, and it's like that rhythm. And I just gotta say, like a lot of people with their forum poems that they submitted last week, awesome. Several people tried villanelles. Rhythm is really important in the villanelle as well. Not that all of them have it, but it's like sometimes you're working with the rhyme and the alliteration and the rhythm. And I've actually done some free verse where I've used rhythm, but then no rhyming whatsoever, and with sometimes different lengths of lines. So you can use it in the, I don't know if it's dianth or dianthe, but I see that, yeah, you naturally use alliteration. I think it's part of just the way people speak. Like we do speak in a rhythm, and we often we'll go for those words that have that connection. So I think how much is you get feedback that it's not appropriate in prose. I disagree. I actually wrote a prose piece years ago that was completely alliterative. It had a rhythm all the way through, so maybe it was a super long prose poem. But I think you can use it. It all depends, I guess, on the style. Okay, so, I was right. I thought it was a diaphragm. So I think, it also just depends on the market. There's editors out there that hate rhyme, and there's editors who love forms. So I think sometimes you just have to find the right place.
Mm-hmm. Which is why it's good to do your research on the market that you're submitting to when you are submitting to a market, so that you know what the editor looks for, what that audience is, what the readers are for that.
I personally don't like alliteration. I think it um I mean I think less
Shame,
is
shame,
more.
you scurrilous dog.
um I mean I think like I don't know. I think less is more. I personally only like to use it like in like like little bits, but that's just me. Um,
Yeah. And I'm joking about like hissing at you, Max. Like that's why we don't all write the same things, because we all do have our preferences. I probably do use it too much just because I love the wordplay and the sounds and everything. And onomatopoeia is supposed to be in this lesson, and I forgot to put it in the title of what we're talking about. So I'm glad that
This
you
is so
brought that
long.
up. Yeah.
That's like snakes slithering
You
slowly.
should probably talk about meter too, right?
Yeah, not really with sound, I think, but I do want to. We've got a question in the audience that I don't. We've passed over it, so I just want to go back to it. Tom Golden says, talking like, what about I cannot talk today. Sibilance, meaning like when you have like the same sounds, which I kind of think I group them together, but where you have like S sounds making a hissing noise or the Z's. Sibilance is a type of consonants.
Brains.
Yeah, repetition of consonant sound for aesthetics, or which I mean, really, what is the difference to you guys? Because I think I would probably group assonance and sibilance together. I mean, maybe I'm not correct with that.
Yeah. It is kind of, I think, similar. Maybe it's just more specific to have the sibilants, but siblings that are sibilant.
I Googled an example of sibilance, like, well, so that I could have something to say, like as an example. So Samuel Taylor Coleridge's poem, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, the white foam flew, the furrow followed free. So I think I would probably, I mean, what do you guys think?
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if that's sibilance, that's, I don't know. I don't see there's a big difference.
Yeah.
Arose by any other name.
All right, let me move on to our next question. Talking about alliteration, we've talked about that. How do these things enhance poetry? Talking about assonance, sibilance, all of it together. Like, what are some of the ways you guys think it enhances a poem? Like, I kind of brought up, like, when you use a lot of S's, to me, that's a very sexy sound, like the sweat sizzling on a hot summer sidewalk. I don't know why I keep quoting Lois here in whatever cartoon that is that I cannot remember. Or it could be sinister, like snake slithering, I mean, these things enhance the poetry. What do you guys think? I mean,
yeah, I think
hearing all sweat, that's a sexy sound to me.
Like a lot of like B sounds and like T sounds and I think those like I like sometimes I use like blood and bone a lot, or like just things that are like that are very they're good when you're trying to write something that's like dark or cosmic, or just for some reason it's just like B sounds or like tenebrous. It's really hard to kind of do alliteration with tenebrous, I suppose, but like things like that, like B sounds, T sounds, D sounds. It's just like a harder consonant, like that, a harder consonant sound. At least for something I think that's like darker and more cosmic and weird. And maybe even S, but like S sounds are kind of like more, more like sexy, I guess, or or sinister, or
well, yeah, and it's, for some of us, sinister is sexy. So I mean, there's that.
Right.
Yeah, like bulbous. Bulbous is just a word that really is onomatopoeic, but yeah, I mean, obviously we use these for effect, and I think you can use it too for dark, like especially where you're building atmosphere. So pured, cosmic, horror, those kind of words that add mood and atmosphere tend to be really important.
Yeah.
Yeah, or words like fat, like fat and mass. Just like because I mean, well, we can probably also get into like syllable count, because that also kind of plays into it too. But like I'm working on a poem for an anthology invite, and like one of the lines I just like I did like it's like the eternity's mass, fat and heavy, but it's like there's an M dash, so it's like I like to play around with like one syllable words like that. Sometimes like bone and blood, things like that, because that can just be like a good like punch in the face.
And that's rhythmic right there, right? Bone and blood has that rhythm. And that's like sometimes if a line in a poem doesn't feel right to you, it might be it's missing a beat or two in that rhythm that may, and because we do kind of talk rhythmically, that we may just be missing on another in one line, and all the rest has kind of inadvertently gone into a rhythm. So yeah.
How about in your own work? Why? Well, in your own work and in other people's work, why might we choose rhyme, alliteration, and assonance? Like, why do we use these things maybe? Or maybe you have good examples in your own work. Like, I use this to portray that. Like, I use a lot of, like, I think I said the last class or one of these classes that I like to start out with a really tight haiku. Sorry, and I've actually also been catching a cold today, so my voice keeps going out. But then I like to do the internal rhyme. And in that, I do use a lot of alliteration and rhyme and assonance together, kind of to create like an organization within the chaos. And so that's why I use it in that chaotic, unstructured part of my poetry when I do that. So how about you guys? Oh, sorry. I said, why might a poet choose to use assonance, rhythm, and rhyme in their poetry? Like, what are some of the reasons?
For me, it's almost like hypnotic, and it's almost like it touches on the internal music and in the reader. I feel like it helps to immerse them in the story or the imagery that you're weaving. For me, I'm really heavy on rhythm,
Mm-hmm.
not because I'm black, just because, you know, you know, just because, yeah.
Or are you saying I can't do that?
So for me, it's like rhythm and rhyme, right? And for me, I just feel like you said, it's such a primal part of just being a person. Like we kind of speak in
Mm-hmm.
natural rhythms and natural rhymes, and then if you can get people to flow into your rhythm and your rhymes, it's kind of like flowing into your thoughts, and then you have that connection with the reader. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
so. I use that because I'm more feel like that helps with being a vehicle for feeling between you
Mm-hmm.
and the reader do the work. So that's me. That's why I do it.
Yeah, you can you're doing something where it's a poem about dance or on the sea. Obviously, you're
Hmm.
going to want to imitate some of that rhythm and use alliteration and assonance to get that. But also, you might want to use it in a juxtaposition. Well, never mind whatever that word is.
We're
But
poets, not speakers.
I speak good. Where you're pulling a person in with something that might have a almost sing-song tone, and then there's like a bloody massacre that happens. So you could use it as kind of like to butt up and jar the other way as well. And um, I mean, it does like it can have its own evocative imagery by using not just the words, but also that alliteration where they tie to one another. You form stronger connection between certain words then as well. Like Max said, blood and bone, it flows together. You've got that in both the assonance and the alliteration in those words. And the and in between gives it the rhythm. So it's a very simple phrase, but yet it has a lot working there. Unlike that one you read that was like, the fur flying and furrowing frenetically. But it's like my sister used to always quote the highwayman when I was a child. And the moon is a The moon is a misty galleon or
Ghostly galleon.
Ghostly
I actually just pulled that up as a perfect example of all of this. So
yeah, the highwayman came riding up to the old inn door. Now with that's more rhythm there, but repetition can work. But you have to be careful with repetition because you have to use it with intent. And it's the same, I think, with alliteration, so that if you have 3 lines in your poem that are completely alliterative and then the rest aren't, it's going to stick out. So then if you want that, it's got to be with an intent that shows that contradiction with the rest of the poem for some reason.
Yeah. And that's actually, it's funny that you brought up the highwayman, because I was thinking of that and I pulled it up. I just shared the link in chat, which for anybody, there's a good link for you to be able to find this poem. But I've talked about this poem so many times because this was my intro poem in like 2nd or 3rd grade to poetry. And this is when I actually decided I wanted to be a writer in some ways because it was so powerful. But he talks about the wind was a torrent of darkness among the gusty trees. The moon was a ghostly galleon tossed upon the cloudy seas. The road was a ribbon of moonlight. And so it kind of slows it down and distills it right there over the purple moor. And then you get like that silent feeling. And then the highwayman came riding, 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 the highwayman came riding up to the old inn door. And so it brings back the tension. That's one of my favorite poems and a perfect example, I think, of all of what we're talking about.
Yeah, and my sister used to also quote the Ballad of Sam McGee. Now, Sam McGee was from Tennessee, where the cotton blooms and blows. And why he left his home there, God only knows. So, that has like Tennessee, Sam McGee, bloom and blow. God only knows. So there's rhyming words, there's assonance, there's alliteration. So all of these techniques are being used in that. And these are older style poems, but I still remember at least part of that verse that my sister used to always quote, just because of that rhythm and rhyme in it.
Yeah. Which I believe in history, that's kind of, I'm actually sharing that link as well. That's because there wasn't a lot of paper going around, and the Gutenberg press, before those times, they did rely on a lot of these things to pass on information, to the alliteration, the assonance, the rhyme, because it does make it more memorable.
The oral tradition, not just oral, but oral.
Yeah, audible and oral. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do they work together to create rhythm in poetry? I mean, you can see like in the highwayman, you've got the different rhythms and the tensions coming up and the speed. Can you guys think of examples? I can also keep reading the highwayman because I really want to, but I won't because I know we are not supposed to just be reading our poetry. But I do love that poem. I'm probably going to read it about 10 times tonight now because we brought it up. But can you guys think of some other ways, like the cremation of Sam McGee, the highwaymen, Robert Frost's The Road Not Taken is a good one, I think, for some of that. Or in your own work.
I'm going to be back in a minute. I'm going to grab a couple poetry cases.
I have some examples of my own work, but I was just trying to think of other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, do your own work as well. Like this is really, I think it's interesting to see how other poets that are contemporary poets, it's one thing to talk about Alfred Noyes, or Edgar Allan Poe, because, we hold them up to that standard. But I actually like it when we share our contemporaries' poetry because it shows how we're doing it today. I don't think that the highwaymen might have been as popular today because it's a bit purple,
I mean, so one of the in Bleeding Rainbows, like this wasn't really meant to rhyme, but it was just more of a kind of more about rhythm. One of the poems was called Cyanide Surprises. And it just goes like I'll just read like the first like 2 or 3 lines because it's a 3-page, it's like a 2-3 page poem. Because it starts pop one, kiss two, and it'll only hurt a little. He said, crack, snap, another star dead, another piece lost, another piece of myself. So like a lot of that for me was just like that was like comma placement more, and you know, just using those kind of using a little bit of like onomatopoeia there to be like, you know, like crack, snap, just kind of getting that that sound there.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
Of
how
course, I
about
can't find any samples right now.
well, how about and I'm probably going to show
the
myself.
Jabberwocky.
Well, yeah, there's that one, but I was also thinking of Dr. Seuss,
Mhm.
honestly.
Yeah,
But
Lewis
I think
Carroll's great. Another thing about Lewis Carroll we didn't really talk about is portmanteaus or portmanteaus. I mean, that's another way to do when you're doing portmanteaus, or however I'm butchering the pronunciation. I think it's
Portmanteau is right.
portmanteau.
Yeah.
You know, which a portmanteau is basically the taking two words and creating another word out of it, which Lewis Carroll was famous for. You know,
like opportunity.
I actually had Lewis Carroll up here. Maybe it's downstairs. But yeah, the Jabberwocky is a great example as well. And a lot of what Lewis Carroll did. So I mean, like, yeah, I would say if you're going to do portmanteaus as well, do it sparingly in your poetry. Don't do it all the time. Like you can do it, and like you can get away with it, but you know, it's just kind of it has to be done. I don't know, not like you're trying to sound like Lewis Carroll.
Yeah, exactly. Because there's only one Lewis Carroll, but there could be your version of that. I actually just looked up examples of portmanteau, which is funny because I kind of think of it as like a not esoteric, but a purely poetic thing or a writing thing. But brunch, I was like, oh yeah, that is one. Smog, brunch is breakfast, lunch. Smog, smoke, and fog together, which I actually thought smog was its own word. Motel, I did not realize is motor hotel. I didn't know that. I thought motel was just a word on its own. This is the one that got me. Internet means interconnected network. I did not know that. I thought internet was its own word. Spork, of course, that's kind of obvious. But yeah, I just thought that was kind of funny because I hadn't really thought of it before. So that was excellent to bring up, Max.
Can I find an example of alliteration in any of these poems? No, I cannot. And you want it, it's like next week, if we're talking about metaphor and simile, tons of those.
That's why it's super handy to have the internet or interconnected network or internet, as I like to call it, at your disposal. So you can be like, oh yeah, what about Robert Frost's poem? You know.
Yeah, but there are living poets that use it too.
We have a comment. The Medieval Craft of Memory by Mary Carruthers is a great book on mnemonics. Pre-Gutenberg. Okay. Highly recommend. I am not familiar with that. I'm going to look it up right now. How about you guys? Are you familiar with that one?
I am not.
What do you guys, because we have had some really, really good poetry come in from the students. I actually thought about like naming names, but I don't want to yet because I want to be prepared. You know what I mean? There was some really, really, really amazing ones. You saw that in your email. I've commented on it. Coming up, I feel like we've already had a lot of this in the poetry. What do you guys kind of want to see for the assignments going forward? For this one, for the assonance, do you guys have anything in particular each of you would like to see as an instructor? Like assonance, alliteration, rhyme. Throwing down the gauntlet here. Maybe.
I know Jamal wants dissonance.
You know me very well. With a little rhyme and rhythm in it, you know what I mean?
And some sibilants.
Assonance.
I don't know. I've already seen some fantastic prose poem so far. So
Yeah.
Good.
I want to see
Yeah,
someone.
there's-
Well, and someone has already written a sonnet. So I want to see some. I want to see someone else. I want to see everyone write a sonnet. I'm just kidding. I won't know.
Okay, well, since now I am going to name a name. No, Michael Payne. Remember last week we talked about how we do need dark poetry for the Crystal Lake anthology coming up.
Yeah.
And so Michael Payne loved this poem. He wrote a sonnet called "Why I Don't Write Horror."
Yeah.
Kind of an objection because he doesn't want to write horror, but it was awesome, and I just love that. And that's what I hope to see coming up this week: is be saucy, challenge us for what we're saying.
I'd say even more challenge yourself. So if you've been trying to sneak in all the free verse, it's time to try a form with assonance or alliteration. And some people have, like, there's been tonkas, villanelles, which aren't that easy. And my brain just went blank. But I've been seeing a lot of different forms with last week's assignment, and it's awesome. People are really trying there and testing different ways that you can put the words together and how it works when you're having to throw in a rhyme or throw in something.
Yeah, I'm looking over my list now of the poems I've got this week. I still have a couple that came in today. My power was out all day, so I will be getting to those tonight after this class. But yeah, some really good ones. All right, so that's a good challenge for coming up. I want to see if actually anybody can use all three in one poem. Kind of like the Highwaymen, but maybe not as, I was going to say old, antiquated. I mean, we could be classic. There's nothing wrong with being classic.
Internal rhyme.
Mm-hmm.
So, a couple people have done that where it's not end of line rhyme, or it may be, but also
I love internal rhyme.
In the middle.
So, I mean, that's just as challenging in its own way if you're doing that in a consistent way through a poem. It's like, I don't know. And a lot of these forms are a great challenge. Hey, try Anglo-Saxon verse. That one is definitely full of assonance or alliteration. It's hard to find samples, and it's difficult. Don't write a long one, because that's what I try to do.
I had to look it up. Anglo-Saxon verse, prosody.
Yeah. That is another. I forgot that name for it.
Yeah, Anglo-Saxon verse or prosody, sometimes called alliterative verse or strong stress verse. It's important because it has like multiple names.
Been around a long time.
It appears to be the oldest metrical system in English poetry. Only English or Anglo-Saxon was the predominant English language before 1100. Oh, Old English or Anglo-Saxon.
Oldie Englishy.
Oldie English or Anglo-Saxon was the predominant English language before 1100s.
Or if anyone wants to be really brave, they could try for extra points. There's no points, but if anyone wants to try a Terza Rima,
Sorry, what was that?
I think it's called Terza Rima or triple rhyme. That's what.
Terza Rima. Yeah. I haven't tried that yet.
That's something I want to try at some point.
Never heard of that.
Terza Rima is what Dante's Inferno was. It's like each stanza has a triple rhyme. Each stanza is triple rhyme, 3 lines. The first and the third line rhyme, and then the second line rhymes with the first and the third line of the next stanza, and then it goes like that in the next, like consistently. So all the Inferno is like that. That's everyone's homework. I'm just kidding.
It's kind of like it's like a chain that links.
Yeah.
Kind of back and forth like that.
Terza Rima.
How do you spell that? I'm actually trying to find that.
Terza, I think, and then Rima.
Arima.
Okay. I actually want to do that now, but maybe not this week. Yep, Dante's Inferno.
It was invented by Dante.
Yeah, I think it was. I think it was
yeah.
his. I think it was his like own unique style.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of these have come about because somebody invents a new form, right?
Yeah.
And that kind of goes back to the whole thing about no rules. Like, you know, like Dante invented his own, his own rhyming scheme that now I'm sure probably universities study and teach. You know, at this point.
Wow, that is complicated. ABA, BCB, CVC.
The CDC,
And then,
what? You could write what the CDC verse has to be about a plague.
okay. And then I think I brought up Robert Frost, The Road Not Taken is another example of this. Two roads diverged in the yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. And be one traveler, and long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. I love his rhyme because, you know, we often talk about rhyme is, you know, the stepchild that nobody loves in poetry right now. I'm going to say right now because it's a faddish stylistic preference thing. It's not right or wrong. But I think in that one, you know, it rhymes, but it doesn't have that cloying kind of rhymey feel to me. How about you guys?
Yes. Yes, I agree. I had to think back for a minute, but yeah, but like The Road Not Taken doesn't, like I've read some poems that rhyme that I didn't even realize they rhymed because one, they were using like internal rhyme or like in the middle of each sentence, and the way that it read, you don't stop at the end of the line because you're flowing to the next one. And in fact, somebody did, well, they did sort of a villanelle where they did a bit of that, but with that some envelope rhyme as well. So you know, it's interesting because you can play with forms. I wrote a poem at one point, and after I wrote it, I went back to like a year later to work on it. I was going like, what is this form I've used? And I like spent like days trying to find the form, and I think I made it up. So I could never find it.
Yeah.
One of the things I'll say about, you know, so it is important to read contemporary poets and contemporary poetry.
Yeah.
You know, at least in terms of understanding what is going on and like, you know, and just understanding, you know, not form, because that's what I'm gonna say. In terms of like the state of literature for contemporary poems, but there's a reason why some of these poems, there's a reason why these forms are still studied. You know, so I would suggest, you know, if you are interested in terza rima, for example, you know, or like you know, like T.S. Eliot, or you know, some of these other forms, you know, read them and understand the forms, but you know, write it with a contemporary mindset. You know, because that's what a lot of that's what a lot of poets do when they're first starting out. They'll read, like I was reading Lovecraft and Clark Ashton Smith, and then when I was writing prose poetry at first, it was like, oh, this sounds like Lovecraft, you know, or this sounds like Clark Ashton Smith, which happens. Everyone does that, but you know, you'll read Shakespeare, and you know, if you want to write, well, I keep going back to sonnets for some reason, but you know, if you want to write sonnets, you'll read Shakespeare, and then all your sonnets will sound like Shakespeare until you figure out your own voice, and then it's your voice just writing sonnets. But the point is, you know, I would, you know, read Shakespeare, read T.S. Eliot, read Robert Frost, read all the old
Dead white guys.
Yeah.
But also read Tortured Willows and
yes,
I don't know.
And contemporary poets.
Yeah, The Lore of Inscrutable Dreams, Bleeding Rainbows.
Rainbows, there you go.
I have found my poem in here that I wrote. I want to read this because if somebody can tell me if I used a form that exists, I would love to know, because I don't know. All of the verses, except for the first and last one, are 4 lines. The first and last are 3. So here's the poem. She lies upon me as I sleep and lets her fingers around me creep. Oh yes, and presses them quite deep. I dream that she lies quite still, at one with me to bide her time. But as the days grow less bold, she shifts and sighs with weary cold. I dream her breath is soft and warm, yet hides an underlying chill. Her only sounds are snaps and groans, but mute I hope she will go home. I dream she holds me close and tight, and as her whispers blanket me, I try to leave, yet must remain. They lace the Arctic in my veins. I dream her fingers seek me out, dig in, and burrow till I scream. And roots like ice suck numb my shell. Her freezing force won't let me wake. Winter lies upon me as I weep, and wraps me in a shroud of sleep. Oh yes, and presses me quite deep.
So this
And I
is
did, yeah, and I did break it. I broke the rhyme in the second last verse. I think that might have been on purpose. But I don't know. I think I created that form, but I don't know. And it's if anybody else wants to read it, you can find it in just like Max. I'm trying to find that sweet spot. No, it won't work. It won't work.
Yeah, that's awesome. I don't know what form that is.
Yeah.
I think it's funny. I thought that I'd created a form with chained haiku, and then I found out, oh no, that's been
It's
around
chained
for like
haiku.
thousands of years, called Rensaku and things like that. But yeah, that would be interesting to find out if it influenced you like that form, or the
Well,
opposite.
and I'm sure like villanelles and stuff like that influenced me just because of the rhythm in this. But God only knows. Because sometimes I do. I start a poem and I go back to it a year later, several years later, if it's not working. And I know that poem kind of sat in various stages, so I don't remember it all.
Yeah. I want to bring up something that we haven't brought up yet. How about contemporary forms of poetry and rhyme and assonance and alliteration and all of that? And one form in particular I can think of is like music, like rap, song, that's what it is. I mean, if we want contemporary examples outside of poetry, but I always think that song is poetry. It's just poetry to music. So I don't know really why we have such a distinction. I have heard poets say, I don't listen to music. Like, oh, I don't like song. I don't like when people put music to poetry. And I'm like, but music is poetry.
Yeah, like Jamal, you read some of the pieces I've heard you read. You definitely have that rap cadence in your pieces, and like David Bowie, I always considered him a poet first. And
he was actually a poet. Influenced by. Now I can't think of the name. Is it Rudyard Kipling? Who did the cut-up method?
The cut-up method?
Yeah, the cut-up poetry method. I want to say it was Kipling.
Really? I thought Kipling was older than cut-ups.
I think it was whoever wrote Tarzan, I want to say. Boy,
Edgar Rice Burroughs.
Edgar Rice Burroughs.
Oh, it was him. Yeah, I don't know why I was thinking Rudyard Kipling. But yeah, and he did the cut-up method, and David Bowie took that from him. Well, not took it from him, but I guess was inspired by that to do his own, and that's how he wrote a lot of his songs. I was just reading this last week. That's why I can't remember. Oh, yeah. Yep, that was it.
William Burroughs.
William Burroughs. Thank you.
Yeah, because I was going like Edgar Rice
Burroughs.
Wasn't
Edgar Rice Burroughs? Didn't he die in the early 20th century?
He was. Yeah.
This is why I'm a writer, so I can do research before words come out of my mouth. Yes. I'm just gonna say.
I'm like, wow, I didn't know he lived that long.
The sun's coming up like a big bald head. That's William Burroughs.
I mean, I think it's also I'm not going to start a controversial debate on rap versus musical theater, but that's speak singing has been around for a while. You can go back to Ziegfeld Follies, you can go to Rodgers and Hammerstein, you can go back way before it. But I'm just a big musical theater nerd, so I mean, you listen to West Side Story, listen to anything Stephen Sondheim. I mean, that's a really good example of getting that, and there I just sang for everyone.
I love it.
Sondheim, Sondheim, Kander and Ebb. A lot of their shows kind of had that. That rhythm. Sondheim in particular is notorious for his lyrical talent in how he is poeticism in a lot of his lyrics. Just pick any of his shows. And it's there. Whenever I want some sort of rhythmic inspiration, I'll listen to Sweeney Todd, and like because there's just detail in every single line of the lyrics that he writes. Then that gets into the age-old debate: music versus lyrics, and we won't get into that right now.
So what about the vessel with the pestle? Does it have the brew that is true, or is that the chalice from the palace? I've been watching some old Star Trek Enterprise, which I'd never seen before. And they're watching old movies always on the starship, and like old movies. And one has that, and I think was it Danny Kaye? And there was these long, they're not really songs, but there's the whole kind of like comedic scene of them talking about the vessel with the pestle and the chalice with the palace. So
that's so
you don't want to go that rhymey.
I was going to say, isn't that Princess Bride?
Yeah. I'm Inigo Montoya.
Pixie says, I keep intentional typos as a cut-up technique. Labdanum became Londonum today. Typos are sometimes better. And then that was autocorrect, laudanum, because I actually studied the first message like, And then Ragdoll Poet, like meditations in an emergency, was a misreading of medications in an emergency. Yes. And that's actually, that's how I love when you mispronounce things a lot of times. Like one of the ones is hyperbole. I used to always say is hyperbole. Yep. And then that became cake and hyperbole. Or no, that became cake and hyperbole because a poet friend of mine, Amy, thought that I had said, when I was explaining that, she thought I said hyperbole. So it was like mistake upon mistake upon mistake became something beautiful, which is why I say no rules. Like if you break everything, you might have something good.
Mm-hmm.
And voice to text mess ups can create some new and intriguing phrases. I agree.
Oh, yes.
So that might actually be a good challenge for this week. A lot of the poets have been kind of expressing that they would like some kind of thematic guidance. So that could be like, you don't have to do this, but if you choose to do a voice to text message poem, like have that in your poem using alliteration and rhyme and assonance and all of the things that we just talked about, I challenge you. But not us. No.
No, because we're going to be looking at all of your poems. Yeah. We don't have time to write poems.
Burnt tongue.
Burnt tongue.
Oh, Chuck, yeah.
There's a famous poem that's probably, what was it, from either I don't know if it's the 50s or 60s, I can't remember the writer, but it's called The Typewriter. So at the advent of the typewriter becoming really well used, and I think this might have been by the time there were electric typewriters, someone wrote a poem that wouldn't work well today if you tried to write it, because it was kind of at that time when everybody was familiar with the mistakes and all the little typos and everything that came out of like typing by hand, just like you said, like voice to text. That's now our kind of equivalent to the typewriter.
Was it by Matthew Francis?
Could be. It's been a while. I know I've got it in like a book of old poetry somewhere. But
this one is typewriter. One day I'll fetch the Smith Corona from the cupboard, set it on the desk, and unclasp its blue plastic shell to expose the nakedness of its baby grand workings. I don't think this is probably it.
It might be, because it actually is like it starts to get full of typos because of how the typing happened. That sounds like that might be it. And so it sounds like it's the advent of the electric typewriters before there were such things as computers.
Yeah, the slap of the silver lever that jerked time forward, the shift key that tilted the world on its fulcrum, the gray formalities hedged by tabs and margins that turned language into geometry like Braille, or the Braille of the other side of the page under the fingertips. I will share this.
Yeah, I don't know how many poems called the typewriter, but it would have been an older poem.
Mm-hmm. Saying things like your tongue is burnt. Yes, that's me speaking just English in general, KT. I just like my natural way of speaking. This is that poem. But so does anybody
interviewing Chuck Palahniuk in early August? We're going to be meeting him.
Oh, nice.
Randomly. Yeah.
Yeah, he has an open mic reading thing in Portland where he lives that I really want to go to.
Yeah.
Put in a good word for me because he's actually on my list of people I want to interview. So,
well, if you ever come to Portland, you're gonna have to make a visit up here or me down there.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I will probably actually be there next spring.
He does a lot for the poets in the community up there, the writers.
Mm-hmm.
Really.
Oh, and isn't StokerCon somewhere?
Speaking of
West
linguistic
Coast,
typos,
San Diego or something?
Yeah, San Diego.
It's like
San
it might be
Diego,
so hot you need a Stoker cone.
Nowhere near Portland, but
Yes,
Nowhere near, but still West Coast.
But there's Max's next fundraising idea: Stoker cones.
right.
Selling ice. Anyways, we're digressing. We're almost out of time. Do you guys want to share your thoughts on the poetry so far? Your thoughts on how the students are progressing? I'm going to say I feel a little bit punked by some of the students because they kind of came in here like, oh, we're new. And no, you're not. These are excellent poems. I do not believe that this is brand new poetry from people that I don't know what I'm doing. Why don't you bet me money on poetry? No, because there's too much good stuff coming in. So that's my thing. I feel a little bit punked because everybody's like, oh, teach us. You guys already know what's going on. How about
I do know there's some experienced poets in this group, but I also have been quite impressed, especially with the forums, because forums are not always easy. And like what people are turning in this last week, like you guys are awesome, and it's inspiring me. Like I'm going, oh, I want to do more forums. I want to do more Tonka and Dylan Ellis and noisy cars in the background.
What is that?
I gotta write an onomatopoeic poem about cars.
I felt like forums actually improved a lot of people's writing. So I was wrong, thrice over.
What?
Oh wait, what did you say?
I was wrong. I actually witnessed how forums can actually help people's writing so much and bring out the best in them. A lot of time, and also feel like people are starting to be more intimate with their poetry, more personal, which I think is really helping a lot too with it. So they're having fun, but it feels like it's shifting more to the personal, which I like. So I was really impressed. They're really good. They're really good.
And don't forget, KT, like I know you said you're still terrified. Remember, you can take a poem that's out there and you can either do a call and response to it or you can invert it. So,
or you could write about being terrified about writing poetry.
There you go. Like I hate writing. I hate horror or whatever.
Yeah, why I hate writing poetry? Why poetry scares me, So.
Yeah. Well, and KT actually bringing it, since KT has called themselves out, I'm going to bring up their poem Plague Hag, which I thought was very good. So seeing the message, seeing that comment that you feel uncomfortable with zero experience, Plague Hag was awesome. I believe I sent that on to Maxwell, and I was very impressed. And I would not have said like, oh yeah, this is somebody with zero experience with poetry, which brings me to why we can all write poetry and why we should.
Yeah, take a story you have and condense it down into a poem.
Mm-hmm.
And Katie, I know you and I were just in something recently and you had a vampire story. You could always see if you could turn that into a poem.
Yeah, I've been really, really happy with all the poetry coming in. And I've actually been inspired because seeing the way other people are writing it and approaching it, I feel like I have kind of gotten into a slump. You get used to doing it and you're under deadline all the time and like having to just push stuff out to make that deadline. And so seeing people play with poetry has really kind of made me feel like playing with poetry again.
And don't forget, ekphrastic poetry is poetry that's inspired by another piece of art, whether that's a song or a painting, like the background that Max is sitting against, or by another poem. It's like, and that's like, don't forget Rattle. They always have an ekphrastic challenge every month up at their site. Look it up, and they'll put up a piece of art, and you can write to that challenge. And then it's like, if you need a topic, I mean, like I said, we can't always assign you a topic, but there's always you can go out there and find a topic.
Yeah. Or I've now gotten fascinated with taking bright, happy poems ever since I did that one inverse. And I now want to invert all the happy poetry that's free domain that I can find. So feel free if you want me to invert a poem that's happy, I will put that doom and gloom on it.
And deconstruction, they do it with our desserts and our meals in restaurants now. Why not do it with a poem?
Yeah, and that doom and gloom spot happens to be my happy place.
So I actually have potentially a challenge for everyone, and ekphrastic. I'm butchering it. So I'm gonna send this picture to Angela to put in the chat.
Okay.
An optional challenge if people want to try to write in. I'm going to butcher it.
An
ekphrastic poem. So I have this weird. Sorry, hold on one second. I apologize.
I don't think I can share a photo in the chat, but if you send it to me, I still have to send out the handout for today, and I can include it with it.
Okay. Sorry, I can't text and talk at the same time.
And dance in a circle.
I know, and pat my belly.
That's why we can't text and drive at the same time.
So I just sent this picture to Angela. So I have this my partner and I found this really weird painting by this Portuguese artist. And so it's in my office. So I want everyone to try and write some kind of poem, whatever form. It's really.
That's some dark shit.
Looks like a slatted back.
Sometimes when I can't think of stuff, I look at this picture. It's really weird. It's a very weird picture.
Oh, the dirges. I'm going to share that in chat. The name of it, and then I will share that on the screen. Okay, and then I guess the extra thing would be to put your alliteration, your rhyme, assonance, all of
your
that.
Dissonance.
The ekphrastic is optional, and even if you just want to do it on your own for fun, just as an inspiration.
I'm going to go look this up, and I will tell you if I'm going to do this or not. Oh, yes.
It suits your dark heart.
It does. I feel very happy and satisfied now with that. So yes, I will do that as well. But all right. So I think that's about it for this week. Do you guys have any final things you want to share or talk about? I thought you were saying yes. And I was like, okay, feel free. I think this topic tends to be one that, like, it's almost too simple, but every time I see it passed over, it's one of the ones that somebody needed. And it does bring a lot to poetry. You see it over and over again, even talking about Dr. Seuss. I mean, we don't tend to talk about him in poetry circles, but that's all of this rolled up for children. A lot of children's books have that as well. So it's super effective. It's very effective for getting your message out, getting that rhyme, hooking a reader neurologically, because our brains are wired to like that, which is why we have nursery rhymes and everything. So I urge everybody, even though it's kind of feels like one of those primary lessons in poetry, it's because of that, I think it's often overlooked. And so I'm glad we talked about it today.
Nursery rhymes, the mother's milk of poetry.
Exactly. So, and then next week we are going to be, we're already up to week 6, working with metaphor and simile, which happens to be one of my favorite topics in poetry. So, and that's where we're going to be talking about the importance of figurative language, talking about metaphor and simile, and also, of course, you guys generating your own work with metaphor or simile. So, but yeah, I guess that's it. We will be back next week with more information about poetry. And other than that, I look forward to seeing everybody's poems. You guys are doing amazing. Yeah, like I said, I feel a little punked here that everybody said their beginning, but you're not. Excellent poets. All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.